One thing that I do want to stress to anyone that's learning how to code is like, do not get stuck in tutorial hell. I find it's very easy to just like go on YouTube and take tutorial after tutorial and just like project after project and never really stop. And I'm so glad like the tech people that I was following and listening to emphasize this. Like, whatever you do, like, do a few projects and then start applying. Do a couple more projects, start applying, and just like always apply to jobs. Is it a tech podcast? Well, technically, yes. This is the show for current and future techies who are curious about exploring the world of tech. You'll get to hear from exciting guests, highlighting the diversity of roles and careers within the space, how you can get started, but also the life that comes along with it before, during, and after. My name is Stella, and this is the Technically Yes podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Technically Yes podcast. I'm your host, Stella, and today's episode is going to be all about my tech journey, kind of how I got here, the steps I took, and what even prompted me to get into the tech space to begin with. I wouldn't say my journey is completely atypical. I find there's a lot of people that have sort of taken my steps in the industry. I actually did a poll on my Twitter a few years back, trying to figure out like what steps people took. And I found that it was pretty much like a 50-50, 60-40 split, 40 being people that have taken my journey. So it's not super atypical, but I find it's not something that a lot of people consider, especially if you haven't sort of thought about getting into tech or explored those avenues. So I kind of just wanted to go over that. For myself, I did touch on this in the last episode. So really what it was is I was working in real estate prior to getting into tech. I had dabbled a little bit in the tech space as like a child, I guess you could say. So like I was on MySpace. I'm hoping everyone that's listening to this podcast knows what MySpace is. But if you don't, MySpace is sort of like the forefathers of social media, I'd say. And that's what a lot of us were using back in the day to connect with other people all over the world. I know we had some local platforms here in Toronto as well. So like T.Wire was one of them. There was also Black Planet. But yeah, essentially those were the early days of social media. And I was on social media back then, and I dabbled a little bit with like HTML and creating and customizing my own sort of, I don't even know if I can call it a profile page, but customizing my own MySpace page. A lot of my friends kind of saw what I was doing, so I was doing it for them as well, uploading like background music, all that fun stuff. But since then, like I hadn't really touched technology, so to speak, from that perspective. I was working in real estate, did real estate in Toronto for about 7 years, and that was a really fun experience. But over time, like a few years into my career, I just found that it wasn't that enjoyable anymore. Like in my first year, I'd say it was a complete wash. Real estate in Toronto, well, not in every aspect, but for a lot of companies, it is commission based only. So like my first year, I was in my 20s. None of my friends were buying homes. Like we were all living at home. I was living at home. And I really had to find ways to build my business. So 2016, 2017, I won an award. So I won awards those years, did pretty well for myself. But even so, like every year I kind of found like, it was like the great reset, right? Where you just have to come back, you start back at zero, sales. And then you have to figure out like, okay, well, where's my business coming from this year? Where's my business coming from this month? The sales cycles are quite long. You're looking at around 90 days here, like when it comes to real estate, but honestly, it just really depends. It's really client specific. And yeah, in those cases, I mean, it was like, you're not doing a ton of volume. Some people might buy with you this year and then next year they're not buying, or hopefully they're referring you to someone. But either way, it was one of those things where I was just like, as time went on, I had some like personal things going on. Life kind of did what life does. And I was like, this is not my favorite thing anymore. During my time as a realtor, I was working on a lot of like my own marketing materials, trying to figure out ways that I could market myself like online, as well as doing like door to door marketing. I did a lot of door knocking, and I'll attribute a lot of my success to door knocking, and really just like boots on the ground finding clients. But yeah, like towards the end of my career, I just wasn't as motivated. Like I said, like I had a lot of stuff going on, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I felt like my clients could feel my energy. I wasn't showing up like wholeheartedly for them, and if quite frankly, I wasn't even doing that for myself. And yeah, it came to a point where I was just like, I got to figure out a way to get out of this. I believe it was in 2018, I decided to take a break from the business. I started working as an account manager for a tech company here downtown Toronto. And during that time, although I wasn't working like as a developer, I got exposed to technology. And I want to say that was like a pretty pivotal moment for myself. Um, I did not love working as an AM. I mean, I was definitely, that in itself was also a grind. I wasn't super passionate about what I was selling as well. I was selling like cybersecurity. I mean, like anything technology, really, like software, really, SaaS products, stuff like that. And yeah, that wasn't too exciting. I tried to make a pivot within the company to the L&D department. And for those who worked with me during that time, uh, you guys know what a vibe that department. L&D is learning and development. That department was a whole vibe. I was like, this is where I want to be. But I had some haters at work, mainly management. My manager was just like, anyways, my manager was basically like not supporting me in that move. I had support from pretty much everyone else in the company except for her. And she really had the final say in the decision in terms of if I could move out of like my account management position into L&D. Because she didn't allow it, I was kind of just like, there's no real point in me sticking around in this company. Like, I'm not really that happy. The work culture was not the best fit for me, I'd say. And I was like, you know what, let me get back into real estate. So I left, went back into real estate, and I was like, okay, this is not it either. But the thing is, I'm the type of person, I cannot be without a job. Like, I don't have that privilege. I can't just sit around. So I constantly had to ensure that I was employed. So therefore, I went back into real estate despite me not loving being in the industry, being in the business. So I think I did that I went back into real estate for about 2 years. Yeah, like a year and a bit, because 2018, 2019, I went back into real estate, did that for a bit. And then shortly thereafter, actually, no, let me back up. While I was working for this tech company downtown Toronto, I met a really good friend of mine. Her name's Kayla. Kayla is an amazing individual, and she told me that at the time, her boyfriend at the time was teaching at Canada Learning Code. Canada Learning Code is like a tech learning center located at King and Spadina, I believe. And Dave was teaching women's learning code. And I mean, let's just pause for a second, because that in itself just speaks to Dave's character. The fact that he was teaching, like he had a full-time job. And on his evenings, he would teach women how to code. And Kayla made the suggestion that we should take one of these courses. I don't even know how this came about, but I guess we were discussing it at some point, talking about like coding, technology, things like that. I think she had mentioned that Dave was a developer. And she's like, yeah, let's take one of these classes at Canada Learning Code. So me, Kayla, and a former friend of mine, we ended up enrolling in the Women's Learning Code segment. That was super fun, super exciting. It's like even funny, like looking back on it now. Like I remember learning CSS and being like, oh my gosh, this is like so cool. This is so mind blowing, because like most of my experience was with HTML. So once I kind of got to learn CSS, I was like, okay, this is really fun. Like I want to say we did about like 2 or 3 classes there. before that sort of came to an end. And I don't know who made the suggestion, but I think it was Dave. And he was like, you know what, if you want to keep learning, if you guys want to keep learning, we can just run sessions at our condo. You guys can come over, we can run these coding sessions, and you guys can learn some more and kind of work on some fun projects. And for me, that was amazing. But actually, what's funny now looking back on it and thinking about it is I didn't even have a laptop at this time. Like, I just had my iMac, and that was like my computer. I had my work computer from the company that I was working at, but I didn't have a laptop. I'm pretty sure my laptop was like broken at that point. It was the same laptop I had since university. And yeah, it was just like working off my iMac and like, our cell phone. Um, so I remember, I think I was using like my work laptop, or Dave had an extra laptop that I was borrowing. I don't really remember. But either way, we were running these sessions at their house. We would like order Uber Eats and just do these coding sessions. So we did that, and that was like so much fun. I don't really know how that came to an end. I mean, I'm sure life just got busy. But either way, so I kind of had that foundation. I Those seeds were planted. I was I still had that kind of like itch around coding and being a developer and things like that. And I was like, this could be a really great opportunity for me to move into. Dave was also saying that the fact that like there isn't enough women in the industry, um, women are needed in the industry. And he just kept like emphasizing on the amount of opportunities that were available. So still did real estate, of course, was still doing that. But then fast forward to 2019, 2020, the pandemic hit, right? I mean, we got rumblings about the pandemic late 2019, first quarter of 2020, and then everything just shut down. And for me, I was sitting there. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, I wasn't able to do any showings as a real estate agent. I was afraid to do showings because I'm walking into these condominiums that have like 2,000 residents. And the whole thing just made me super uncomfortable. And I wasn't even super passionate about real estate, anyways. So I was like, you know what? This will probably be the best time and the best opportunity for me to pivot and move into real estate full time. Like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now. I had all the time in the world. And, like, don't get me wrong, I completely understand the pandemic was such a crazy time. We lost so many people during the pandemic. And if you didn't do anything during that time, like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Um, it was one of those things like you just had to do what was best for you in that moment. So if that was like doing absolutely nothing, um, I mean, that is completely fine. My way to cope, however, during that time was definitely keeping busy and staying busy. Um, and, there was a lot of I mean, we couldn't see our friends, we couldn't see our family, our partners, things like that. So that in itself was just very hard for me. So like for a way for me to stay distracted was I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go on YouTube and I'm going to do YouTube tutorials and I'm going to learn how to code. And I'm going to build a portfolio and I'm going to just like dedicate a lot of my time to this because I mean, we thought it was going to last 2 weeks. I remember they said like stay home for 2 weeks. So I honestly didn't think I would have months of coding, but it turned into being literally months, where I could sit at home and work on my skills, so to speak. So I was dedicating, oh my gosh, I don't even know, like hours. Like I would be up till like 3, 4 in the morning sometimes. Like I would do two things during the pandemic. Like I ate, actually three things. I ate a lot, I did puzzles, and I did coding. Like those were like the three things I did during the pandemic because there was literally nothing else to do. So I just remember like I would be cooking and then I'd go on my computer and I'd code and then I'd eat and I'd code and I'd be sitting at my desk and I'd be snacking and coding. And like yeah, I would do that until like 3, 4, 5 in the morning. Sometimes the sun would come up and I'd still be on my computer. And yeah, I want to say, I mean, timeline is like I tried to look through my emails before I recorded this episode to get the exact timeline, and I couldn't quite find when I got the reply. But either way, one thing that I do want to stress to anyone that's learning how to code is like, do not get stuck in tutorial hell. I find it's very easy to just like go on YouTube and take tutorial after tutorial and just like project after project and never really stop. And I'm so glad like the tech people that I was following and listening to emphasize this. Like, whatever you do, like, do a few projects and then start applying. Do a couple more projects, start applying, and just like always apply to jobs as you're kind of developing your skills. Because the mistake that a lot of people do is they put so much time into these projects and they never feel ready to apply to jobs. So I think I was like 2 months in when I started applying to some jobs. Yeah, I want to say I was about 2 months in. So around pandemic, like lockdown hit in March, and by May, by like May, I started applying to jobs, but I was still coding on the side, right? Still building my portfolio, all that stuff, and yeah, I was just sending out applications. I was mainly focusing on like entry level junior developer positions at digital agencies. I was focusing on the different languages that I was learning at the time. I mean, there was just so many different ones. I had no real like sense of direction, even in terms of like what language should I be learning. So I was taking a lot of that on and just trying a little bit of everything, to be honest. I feel like now it's kind of funny because I tell people, you spend so much time learning all these languages when you first start out, but if you're not using them during your career, you forget. So like most of them I don't even know anymore. But yeah, I just really took the time to start applying to different roles while I was, working on my portfolio. And I did hear back from a few companies. I remember there was this one company, I don't even remember what the role was or the language, but either way, I completely bombed the interview. They sent me a coding test like a coding challenge for me to take home. And I just remember it being so difficult and I was so bad at it, even with Google, even with all the stuff, like posting in Facebook groups and asking for help. Like I was just terrible. So that was hilarious. But, they were still super cool. They were very respectful and they were like they still encouraged me to continue on my journey, which was nice. I think I had about like 5 or 6 projects in my portfolio. I'd applied to a digital agency here in Toronto, and they had replied back to me. So I got the reply back and I was like, okay, they want to interview with me. Then a couple of days went by and I hadn't heard back. So I sent a follow up. And like, don't be afraid to follow up. That's the other thing. I feel like I sent that follow up back to this agency because I was like, listen, this is low hanging fruit. They replied to me, I need to ensure that I'm like staying on top of this. And I ended up interviewing with them and I got the job. And the interview process wasn't like that difficult. I feel like I was very upfront about my skills and like what I knew, but more importantly, like I kept stressing how much I was willing to learn and the effort that I was willing to put into my role, like once I got hired. So they hired me on a contract basis. I think they were like, we can't give this girl a salary because we have no idea if this girl's even going to be around. And I mean, they're not wrong, but they hired me on a contract basis. And I mean, that was it was just a crazy, crazy experience. Like, I learned so much at this company. And that's the other thing too. As you're navigating your career, you kind of have to decide like if you want to work in a startup environment. Startup environments are like inherently very scrappy, where like all the formalities are skipped. Like there's no real documentation. They just kind of like, it's all about like that grit and tenacity. Like how much are we willing to get the job done, regardless of like the structure, right? Whereas you can work at like a corporation where it's very formal. They have things in place. They have like a method to everything that they do, right? So I was with a startup, and I mean, I cannot even express how much I learned during the time that I was working there. And that's another thing that I think is very important to understand, that like you will learn so much on the job. You don't have to know it all prior to applying, prior to putting yourself out there, because they will teach you a lot of this stuff. Every company has its own way of doing things, and really and truly it's about getting your foot in the door and the willingness to learn once you're there. So once I was there, I mean, my skill set, my confidence just like skyrocketed. I got a promotion. I got hired in June. So the pandemic hit in March. I was in my role by June. And by December, I got my first promotion. Or sorry, I had 3 months probation, um, made it through probation. By December, I got my first promotion, I'm pretty sure. Actually, no, I think I got a promotion like right after my probation, actually. And then December, I got another promotion. And it kind of just grew from there. Then, I mean, it's crazy. Then I was offered a director of operations role. My boss at the time was hiring for director, and he was like, "Listen, I see the work that you've put in. I see what you've done. I'm looking to hire for this role, this operations role. I can either hire someone externally, or if this is something you're interested in, you can take it." And I was like, "Yes, I'll take it." I think I was like, actually, no. I was like, I need a day to think about it. But then I was pretty much like, yeah, I'll take it. Um, so, I mean, even in that role, however, it was very much like, yes, I handled some of the operation stuff, but since it was such a small company, like really and truly, a lot of my role was like product related. I was still also developing on the side. I was liaising with customers, excuse me, different stakeholders, things like that, and really just like running the business essentially. I was running a lot of the business, making sure that all of our developers were delivering on time, that our projects were up to par, negotiating projects with clients, things like that. So it was like a crazy, crazy learning experience. I want to say about 2 years in, so a lot of changes at the company, a lot of things happened. We had an economic downturn. One of our partners no longer was our partners that was based in the US. So ultimately, I ended up getting laid off. Um, as you guys probably know, 2022, 2023 has been like a lot of tech layoffs. So unfortunately, I was part of that batch. But luckily, I still had my skills on the side, right? So I took some time off, ended up traveling, and I was still working as a developer on the side. So I had my side clients. I was still creating projects and things like that, picking up clients as I was traveling, always like marketing myself to people that I would encounter. And yeah, that really helped me stay afloat as I was trying to figure out like what my next move was going to be. When I was in my previous role, I mentioned that I was doing a lot of product related stuff. And that's really when I was like, I really think this is the best route for me to stick to, just simply because here's the thing, as a developer, I when I was teaching myself how to code, I loved it. It was so much fun. And I was working on my own projects. So a lot of my own like designs, my own vision. I was just building stuff from scratch. And it was a lot of fun for me just simply because I was like, I know what I want this to look like. I'm creating something for myself. It allowed me to exercise my creativity and just like really be into the projects. Once I got hired as a developer, is very different. What I noticed quickly is like I was like, oh my God, the troubleshooting. All I was doing was troubleshooting. It's like, this is broken, Stella, fix it. That's broken, Stella, fix it. We have a 404, a 503, we have this. And I was like looking at lines of code, trying to figure out like what's broken, what's wrong, what's missing. And like, don't get me wrong, I did troubleshooting on my own projects because you just have to. But it's like when you're in someone else's code and having to problem solve from that perspective, I was like, I don't know, like this is not the most fun thing for me to do personally. I know I work with some people now that like they're so good at what they do and like that's what gets them going and they're super excited about like fixing bugs and doing all that stuff and it's like power to them. But I noticed like I'm such an extrovert and also like the solitude of coding and like working by myself, that is, it wasn't really my thing. I was like, I feel like the business aspect, talking to customers, really getting to understand the user's needs. Who are we building this technology for? What is it that they need? How can we figure out their pain points? I find a lot of times when I was talking to executives, it's like they're underestimating the end user and like overestimating how we are going about building this product. So like they have their vision and it's like, we want the app to look like this, or we need these features, or we need that. And I always found it fun where I could like bring them back down to earth and be like, okay, cool. I love all that. But like, who are we building this for? And what do they need? Because it's like, if this is your vision, cool, but like you're not using your own product. So I really found excitement in figuring all of that stuff out, and the business side as well, in terms of like, is this affordable? Does this make sense when we're building out even just like our MVPs, which is like our minimum viable product? How can we get it as lean as possible to get it out into the right hand so that we can gather that feedback and then continue to build and expand upon this product? So that's really what got me excited. And once I kind of established that, I was like, you know what? I need to move into product full time. This is where I need to be. And that's ultimately what I did. So I began applying for jobs. I did a ton of interviews, like way too many interviews. I would keep spreadsheets of companies that I had interviewed with. And I think at one point it got like, I don't know, I was like at line 100 or like something ridiculous. And I just stopped tracking because I was like, I'm like, opening the spreadsheet is heartbreaking. But what I knew was like, I was not the only one in this position. There was a lot of people out there that were in the same position. I love networking. I'm a part of a lot of like Facebook groups for product people, and I'd met a lot of people from networking events, things like that. So I really took the time to like get an understanding of other people's experiences in the job market. And I just knew like a lot of my friends work in tech. I'm on LinkedIn every day. I saw the layoffs, I saw the struggle, so I didn't feel alone. But still, like I was like, back to the grind. Like we got to hustle, we got to find something. And eventually I ended up getting a job with a company here in Toronto. So I now work full-time in product, and it's been such a fun journey. I work for a company now where like my entire pod, so all the developers that I manage and that are on my team are all women. The QAs are women as well. My manager is a woman, and that is like very rare for me because at my old company, like I was the only woman. Um, I mean, I was like constantly interacting with men, even when we were collaborating with other companies. It was just like a male dominated environment. So this has been like such a nice, fun change for me. And yeah, I'm super excited. So that's sort of my journey. And it's funny because I don't even think I realized how intentional I was about moving into this new space that I am in within tech until my friend said to me, we were on a trip a couple of years ago. We went to Montreal, and she said to me, she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so like, when I got my new job, she was like, I'm so happy for you because I remember when we were in Montreal and we were on that trip and you were like, I want to move into product management. Product management's where I want to be, and that's what I want to do. And I don't even remember saying that to her. But the fact that, like, even then I was saying and was very firm in terms of where I wanted to end up, um, yeah, it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. And it just shows me that I'm on the right path. And the decision isn't ad hoc, it was very intentional. Even if I didn't really, I mean, that was so long ago. So it's not like I was applying for jobs back then, but I definitely knew where I wanted to end up. But I say all this to say that my journey is still ongoing, and I'm still giving myself the opportunity to explore where I'm at right now. I am at a really good company. I'm really happy with where I'm at right now, but you know, things could always change, and I will welcome that change. I will allow that to happen, if God wills it. And yeah, you know, it's been a journey. It's been a journey. It's been super fun. So some of the things that I like, if there's anything I would change along my journey, it would definitely be I would have connected more with other people within the industry sooner. I definitely was online. I mean, I can't really fault myself. We were in a pandemic, right? So it's not like I could go to networking events and meet with people. So I was very intentional about like online and things like that. But I wish I had almost like a buddy or someone that I could, you know, speak to daily, or someone that I could really be in touch with in terms of like figuring out exactly where I wanted to be. that's something on my product journey. I definitely have people that I am so, so grateful for that have supported me since day one. Like literally people that I've met online. Like what I do, I go onto LinkedIn, I type in the role, and I just start scrolling. And I was like, if I feel like a good vibe from someone, I was like, okay, I'm going to click that person. I'm going to slide in their DMs and I'm going to message them and tell them my story. And hopefully they reply and like want to mentor me or like support me in this. So I did a lot of that. So I have some people that have been like just amazing in supporting me and getting me to where I am now, working in product full time. And yeah, I'd say that that would be one of the things. The other thing I'd say, just by way of suggestion, like I mentioned earlier, like as you're on that learning journey, like don't be afraid to just try, right? Like, what does it hurt? Yeah, you may not have all of the skills, you may not be super confident just yet, but just like put it out there. Send out the application, apply for that job. Like, what difference does it make? Usually, if you don't get it, you don't get it. When by the time you're ready, that role is probably not going to be available anyway. So it's like it's better to just kind of get feelers out there, get that practice going, and really get to learn along the way. Because I find like a lot of it's just like failing forward, right? It's just like trial and error, figuring it out as you go, and yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. It really doesn't have to be perfect. I feel like that's one of my issues. Is like I'm afraid to do things unless they're like everything is completely perfect. It's laid out exactly how I want it. I sound exactly how I want to sound. I look exactly how I want to look. And it's like, who cares? Like it's never that deep. Most people don't care, and the ones that do, who cares anyways? And it's like we just gotta like you don't strive for that perfection. Like don't let that hold you back because yeah, it's just not helpful. It does nothing for you in the end. And you can make things better as you go. You're going to find ways to iterate on yourself and, just make things perfect as you go along. And even if they don't become perfect, who cares? It's out there. Someone it's going to resonate with someone's going to love it. And yeah, you deserve to take a chance on yourself essentially. Um but yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's sort of my journey. That's how I got into tech. If you want to become a developer, definitely get in touch with me. I can point you in the right direction. I found with a lot of the people that I was listening to, it's very important to listen and follow people online that resonate with you. The journey is very much like it takes a while. Like you have to put the work in when it comes to anything that you do, right? Like you're not just going to wake up tomorrow and know it all. But most importantly, it's like you have to stick with people that are going to get you excited to show up, excited to log in on their platform, on YouTube, to actually do this stuff. Because if you don't, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be exciting. So I definitely had some really amazing people that I was following along the way on their journey. So if you want to know who that is, shoot me a DM. I'll be super happy to kind of lay that out for you in terms of kind of how I got here and who I followed. But also, even if you are contemplating getting into tech and you don't know exactly where to start, you don't know exactly what you want to do, I would be happy to have that discussion as well. I love having these discussions with people that are looking to get into tech because all too often we feel like it just has to be the one avenue. But like as I said, I worked as an account manager at one point. You also have sales, you have customer service, you have developers, you have people that are doing research, they're doing user experience stuff, UI, design stuff. So like the tech world is like so vast. And I'd say, just to kind of close it off, that was another thing I kind of wish I knew early on, is I had a very narrow view on the industry in terms of what one could do within the industry. So just keep that in mind. There's so many opportunities out there. Even just a quick Google search will show you. And I'm sure there's even like tests and stuff out there that you can take that would kind of point you in the right direction. But I'll always be happy to have the discussion. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm super excited for next week's episode. I'm going to have a product manager on, and we're going to be discussing his journey, how he got here, and also what's in store for him in the future. So yeah, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's always my pleasure to be here, and I can't wait to chat with you guys more next week. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into the Technically S podcast. If you liked today's episode, rate this podcast 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you would like to get in touch with me, reach out to me on Instagram at the Tech Yes Pod, and find me and subscribe on YouTube by looking up the Technically S podcast. Thanks again, and chat to you guys next week.